stand here tonight on the shoulders of many of our peoples who have gone before, who've carried a deep commitment to the Jewish people, and who greatly desired to see the establishment of an Indigenous embassy in Jerusalem. And I link arms with all other Indigenous peoples around the world who've also held this vision. It seems that at this point of history, the time is right for this embassy to be established. We've all witnessed post-October 7th a horrific rise in anti-Semitism and victim blaming. Part of the reason for that is the way that the modern form of anti-Semitism, which is anti-Zionism, has taken hold of the popular imagination. Jews have been divested of their rightful place as the indigenous people of the land. Following the 7th of October, Westerners were almost immediately bombarded with the message, quote, 75 years of colonial oppression. The implication being that somehow Israel deserved to be attacked. The narrative was so powerful that it quickly overwhelmed the empathetic response to what was arguably the most depraved frenzy of violence in the modern period. And within days, some of Israel's opponents fell into Hamas atrocity denial. In contrast, Holocaust denial took years to rear its ugly head in the West. It is my firm conviction that the dominant colonialist narrative is a dangerous political construct devoid of explanatory power. The popular rendering states that the foreign Jewish Europeans invaded Palestine, dispossessed the indigenous Palestinians of their land, and that they engage in oppression to this day. Israel is accused of the worst evils of the day: apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. The superimposition of this fraudulent and simplistic colonialist ideological model on the Israel-Palestinian conflict twists and rewrites history, ignoring facts, evidence, and context. Settler colonialism adopts a binary vision of the world that is divided into the oppressor and the oppressed, painting the former as all evil and the latter totally innocent. The oppressed lose all agency in this formulation and all responsibility for any evil they may commit. Every action is justifiable as resistance to evil colonial oppressors, no matter how depraved the acts of resistance may be. This false narrative has percolated for decades within academia, filtered out to activist circles, politics and media through a powerful propaganda campaign developed in the 1960s and 70s through an Arab-Soviet alliance of the Cold War era. And I have to acknowledge my friend here tonight, Isabella Tabarovsky, who, there she is over there, who has really helped me understand this whole alliance. The Soviet propaganda and disinformation campaign was exported globally and found a warm reception in the Middle East, in leftist circles, and even animated activists in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So the truth is, of course, Jews are the indigenous people of the land of Eretz Israel. It is the place where their identity as a nation was forged, their language and sacred literature developed, their beliefs, customs, and traditions began. It is the most sacred place in the world for Jews. It is the place where ancestors and prophets lie buried. Jerusalem is mentioned around 700 times in their sacred scriptures. This deep connection to a particular land and its ancestors are defining features of indigeneity. And this is what we as Indigenous peoples really identify with. So the restoration of the Jewish people to their ancient homeland and the revival of their Indigenous language after centuries of persecution in the diaspora is a prime example of decolonization. It is an inspiration to Indigenous peoples everywhere. So we stand here with you today in your eternal city and declare that as Indigenous peoples, We recognise that Jews are the Indigenous people of this land, and we stand with you in your struggle. We're grateful for the opening of this door for us to strengthen our relationship with Israel, to tell the story of our Indigenous friendship, and we look forward to developing many mutually beneficial projects. Today is merely a beginning. The Indigenous Embassy Jerusalem is a tangible expression of Indigenous people's support for Israel and affirmation of the Jewish people's Indigenous status. It will provide a symbolic doorway, a place of welcome, and an information hub for Indigenous peoples visiting Israel. We will establish an international network seeking to galvanise Indigenous support for Israel. We will foster relationships and mutually beneficial collaborative projects in education and business and innovation. We will develop a production department and make full use of media and social media channels to tell our stories and to change the narrative. We will host academic symposia because academia is a very important part of this. The Indigenous Embassy Jerusalem will become a tourist attraction that tells the stories of Jewish Indigenous connections and histories and will display Indigenous arts. The embassy will not purport to be an official representation of any of the governments of the host nations or the respective Indigenous peoples, but we plan in time to have an NGO presence at the United Nations. To express Indigenous solidarity with Israel and respond to many of the false charges from an Indigenous perspective. We cannot achieve any of these goals alone, so we invite you to join us in this exciting venture. May this embassy be a forerunner for the day that all tribes and nations will come up to Jerusalem. Thank you.